Good morning. Boy, that was quiet. Nobody's had their coffee yet? Okay. Glad you're here, and I detect a quorum, but we will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Representatives Burke, Beck, Burkhart, Butler, Campbell, Camper, Carr, Cochran, Darby, Davis, Glenn, Grills, Harris, Hazelwood, Hicks, Marsh, Martin, Powell,
Here.
Powers, Rudd, Russell, Towns, Whitson, Wright, Vice Chairman Vital, Chairman Howell.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk, and welcome to each one of you. Today is a special meeting. Going to have a hearing with TDOT and Commissioner Ely and Will and some of the other staff, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit later. Glad for all of our visitors this morning. Congratulations on being able to get awake this early on a cold winter morning. And I want to welcome the new members to the committee. This is a good committee, not because I chair it, because it's just a good committee. We do important work here, and I appreciate your willingness to serve on this committee. Just a word, first of all, one of our members couldn't be here this morning. You may have heard Representative Dale Carr was taken to the hospital. Actually, he took himself to the hospital last night for observation. Just got a phone call just before we gavelled in, and the test results so far look good. He was having some chest pains and pains in his left arm, but the EKG looks good, and some other tests. So just keep him in your prayers and your thoughts, and hopefully he'll be back with us very soon. Want to make a few introductions, first of all. The committee staff, my assistant, Sarah Hutton. There you, pretty little lady in the back. If you need anything from my office, let Sarah know. She's very efficient and very pleasant to work with, so she will be helping us navigate through this session. Committee attorneys, the very always efficient Joel Hayes to my left, and the always friendly and helpful Jeremy Maxwell to my right. Committee research analysts, clerks Will Mansfield and Elish, tell me your last name again. Sweeney. Okay, they're down in the front. And of course, our Sergeant at Arms, Reuben Sanders. You all know Reuben. And the committee intern, who may be stuck in the weather, we're not sure, but she will be here normally, Paola Santiago. And so glad for the staff. And if you need anything from any of those people, please just let them know, and they're very helpful. Glad to have the commissioner with us today. Commissioner Ely, it's always good to see you, and look forward to what you have to tell the committee this morning. And I will ask the committee, while they're making their presentation, if you'd make notes, we'll let the commissioner and his staff finish their presentation, and then we'll open it up at the end for Q&A, if that's okay. So without further ado, let me ask, first of all, any committee announcements or comments from the committee members? Seeing none. Commissioner Ely, you're recognized, sir.
I think I'm on now. So thank you, Chairman Howell and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here today to give you kind of a preview of what many of you have already heard the governor speak over the last few weeks, and we'll certainly be hearing a lot more over the coming days and also in the state next week. And so we wanted to come today to be able to run through a lot about kind of where we got to where we are today and why the governor is proposing what he is proposing. And so I really do want this to be more give and take today, Chairman, so we can answer questions. We have prepared a few slides in the presentation that I want to make sure that I think you all have, and I'll run through those fairly quickly so that we've kind of all level set in being able to do that. When we think about government services that we provide as a state, there's really not another department that really impacts every Tennessean the way transportation does. I mean, if you think about whether it's our young people trying to get to school or college, whether it's our elderly trying to get to a doctor's appointment across town, or whether it's a mom or dad trying to get to a soccer game at the end of the day, then every Tennessean really is impacted by. Uh, okay. Boy, I'd
Speaker
love to
Marsh
hear
is
myself
technically,
talk.
Speaker Marsh is technically challenged. I identify with that myself. By the way, I forgot to mention, if you pardon my interruption, the presentation is on Dashboard. So if you have your iPad with you, you can watch it on Dashboard.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. But as the governor said, as we also know, we're falling behind, and we've got this growing gap between where we are today and where we're headed, just to keep up with our current level of service that we have. And so, Governor asked me earlier this year or last year to really do a scan of the country and look at what other states are doing that have already been where we are headed. And we looked at best practices and lessons learned. And really, the data is pretty definitive, that we are facing, and that we need to take action on sooner rather than later. I want to start really by looking at where we are with funding. And today with me here at the table, I've got Joe Galbato, who's our CFO, that all of you are aware and familiar with, and Will Reed, who has taken Paul's role as chief engineer, and Paul is still helping us from a policy standpoint, and as you know, has a lot of the institutional memory, and we continue to depend on him. But Will has taken over the chief engineer role, and happy to have him in this role. So they're with me today to answer any detailed questions you may have. I want to start though by looking at where we are with the Improve Act. As you know, we passed the Improve Act in 2017. We had, at that time, it was about 962. It was 962 projects, and we were looking at a 10 to 12 billion dollar number. Those original numbers were, I'll say, high-level estimates that had not really done the actual detailed design work involved with what that looked like. Now, fast forward a few years later to where we are now, we've still got a lot of work to do. We've completed about 30% or so of the projects that were part of that original. You'll see this 1,037 number of projects. That's simply because the number of these projects were so large that we had to break them up into smaller portions, and also because just as time evolves, some of them have changed and become additional projects themselves. And so we still have every one of these projects in our long-term plans, and still intend to construct every one of these projects. I will tell you, and we'll get into this a little more later. We have many additional projects that have been added by this body, as well as other community and public officials throughout the state, who have requested projects over the last few years, and projects that we know need to be done. And so I just want to acknowledge that we all know that there are a number of projects out there in addition to the Improve Act that we need to focus on in the coming years. So now let me turn it over to Joe real quickly to look at kind of how the numbers are coming in from a primarily gas tax standpoint. Joe?
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, committee. One additional comment on the Improve Act. So we've mapped out the number of projects, but you'll notice of the 255 projects that have been completed, that cost about $889 million. That's about 5% of the money. So 25 to 30% of the projects have been done, but 5% of the money, those are the quick hits, the quick bridge projects. The heavy lifting is still to come. On the financial side, obviously, we'll get into more of this when we talk about our budget with everyone, but the good news is on the federal side, it seems that for my previous 12 years here, we always come here about a continuing resolution. We do not have a continuing resolution. We have all of our FY23 apportionment, so we are moving forward on that, and it's just north of $1.2 billion from FHWA side. The state side is a little disappointing at this point. You probably all listened to our governor's hearing, where coming out of COVID between fiscal 20 and 21, and between 21 and 22, we've been growing our state user fees at about 4%. And what we define the user fees are gas, diesel, the special petroleum, and vehicle registration. In that hearing, we said that we didn't think we'd be growing at 4% this year in fiscal 23, and these numbers actually show that out. Gas, diesel, special petroleum, you can see that it's trending toward, based on our projections, that we're going to miss the budget by about $5 million. Actually, as of yesterday morning, the Department of Revenue collections are down by $4.4 million. So I think our $5 million is probably on point. The only bright spots appears to be right now vehicle registration. We seem to be, even though the legislature stopped the vehicle registration for 1 year, the other fees on big trucks and whatnot still are giving more than we had thought. So that's the one bright side in this whole thing. So I think, as we said in the governor's hearing, I think vehicle registration, along with the other user fees, will be growing anywhere between 1% to 3%. So we'll certainly be decreasing our growth. So with that, I'll turn it back, Commissioner.
Good deal. So we like to think that our decisions are data driven, and so when you look at the data, it really does paint a picture that we're in a place where we need to take action sooner than later. And many of you have seen various presentations, probably the slides on the left-hand side, the bar charts, just to go through a couple of these quickly so that we're kind of all on the same page, show kind of the bottom line. If you look at those charts, it shows population as a function relative to our actual lane miles, and you see that we're continuing to grow, as we all know, at a high rate of increase, 9% over the last 10 years. And then the bottom chart there is vehicle miles traveled, and you see the one dip there. That was in 2020 when we were in the pandemic. We've already come back out of that and are back up to where we were before, and actually exceeding. And so we know that we're on a path upward in this growth, and that we know that our capacity or our lane miles is basically staying level. On the next middle there shows the statewide, and at the bottom there shows each of our urban areas. Red is not good, and it shows congestion that we're seeing throughout the state in our urban areas. And I will say that we have done congestion studies that show that we have definitely, it's no surprise to anybody in this room, congestion in all of our urban areas throughout the state. And what we have seen as the norm, that we will see, if we do not do something, that we will see delays of up to an hour longer to get between our large cities in the state in the coming years. And we've also seen that what is now more a typical 30-minute commute from outside one of our urban areas that could be as much as an hour and a half in the future if we don't take some action. And so on the far right-hand side shows that this is really not just an urban issue, and I think that's a very important part of the governor's plan, is to recognize that you see on the top right-hand side is what the governor will not do. And one of the things that we think is important is that we don't prioritize only attacking these problems in the urban area, but that we also look at how we address rural congestion. This is showing on the right-hand side there at the bottom, rural congestion and what's happening, not in just suburban areas, but also more rural areas. And we all know areas throughout the state where our original interstates that were built back in the 70s primarily are still in their original 2-lane alignment and have never been expanded. Some of them have, and we need to do more of it. And so part of the governor's proposal is a plan to be able to address that. I'll also say I'll commend this committee. We've been able to maintain our assets in the state of Tennessee better than most states. If you look at any comparison, our assets, our road assets, our bridge assets are in better condition than most states. But the issue is we're falling further and further behind now because we're not able to keep up, and more of our funding is having to go just to maintain what we have rather than be able to increase capacity. So real quickly, I'm going to go through these quickly, Chairman, and then turn it over to you. But just to level set, TASSER did their own study. We also did these congestion studies. I'm saying TASSER said we needed about 34 billion in needs. Our studies were showing 26 billion in the urban areas, and the gas tax that we produce each year, both the state gas tax and the federal gas tax that our citizens pay, generate the money for us to do a program of around 1.2 billion a year. And of that 1.2 billion, over half of it we need just to maintain the assets that we have. And so that leaves us around, give or take, 500 million a year in being able to do discretionary projects or new projects that, I've talked to many of you about that that we need done in your districts. And so if you divide that 500 by each of our regions, we've got 4 regions throughout the state, that's 125 million. And all of you probably got a project in your district that could spend that just like that. And so that gives you a feel for what we're up against in being able to address the needs. And then I would also say that our other challenge that is contributing to that is delivery. It takes us on average about 15 years, about 11 years in the actual development process of a project. When you go through the way it is, Will can expand on that because we believe that we need to be able to build faster. And so 15 years is too long, and we're going to recommend some policy changes to be able to do that. So what that brings us to, there's really 3 components of the governor's legislation that you'll be seeing next week. One is give us the authority to be able to do public-private partnerships. We're the only state in the Southeast one of the few in the country where we don't have the authority to do public-private partnerships. And what these public-private partnerships will allow us to do is to partner with the private sector to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain these choice lanes that the governor is proposing, where the lanes that we have now will continue general purpose lanes, but we can do additional lanes that people have a choice to be able to get in, to be able to get to where they're going in a certain amount of time that's guaranteed. And so that's the reason they're called choice lanes. It's a total choice as to whether you get in them or not. And we can get into more detail with that. But as I mentioned earlier, the governor asked us to look at other states. We've been to Texas, Florida, Virginia, Georgia. All of those states have one thing in common that we don't have, and that's these public-private partnerships that are doing these choice lanes. I will say too that the evidence shows that by thinking outside the box and doing this, it helps the people in all lanes. Chairman Howell mentioned this in a previous meeting. By being able to manage that lane as an express lane, it also helps all the other lanes. And what we would recommend is that we allow transit buses in these lanes. And what that allows the ridership we've seen in other states increase significantly for public transit. The amount of time it takes for those buses and the reliability has increased significantly as well. And so we need to use technology, and we need to use this concept as a means to get more throughput through our existing resources, our existing assets, so that we can get more done quicker. As it relates, I've already mentioned this. We can get into more detail, but in Q&A. But as I said, it's taken us too long. We think that if we move from our traditional way of building that we've done for 75 years, as other states also have done, and doing the right tool at the right time, of more design build, where we're bringing all of our resources together at the same time, then we can move more quickly and not have the 40% increase in price from the time we conceptualize a project to the time we're ready to build it. We'll talk more about that. And the last component is electric vehicles, and we've done the studies. We believe that when you go when the average person goes to fill up their gas combustion engine gas tank, and what they contribute on an annual basis to our road system is around $275 to $300 annually. And what we're requesting is to bring parity to that, to where our electric vehicles are paying the same thing as our gas vehicles, and that would be kind of the third component of this legislation. So I know there's a lot of questions. I appreciate the interest of this committee. I've heard from many of you, and look forward to working with you in the coming weeks to answer any and all questions that you have. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, I'm sure that you've been taking notes, and hopefully you have some questions, and this is a good opportunity to gain a better understanding of what the proposal is. And please raise your hand if you have a question, and Jeremy will put your name on the list. We'll take them in order. But as we're beginning to take the list, let me just ask, maybe this may be a question for Mr. Galvano, but you mentioned the decline in the revenue from our dedicated stream, the gas tax. And it's down, I believe you said about a $500,000 or more or something like that. Of course, this has served Tennessee well for a long, long time, but with the changes in the marketplace and the growth in EVs and hybrid vehicles, is this going to be sustainable without some kind of proactive effort on the part of the state of Tennessee to maintain proper funding for TDOT?
It's a good question, Chairman. And the number is, as of today, collections of gas, diesel, special petroleum are down from year over year, $4.4 million. It's going to require action on the state and the federal level. The EVs, as we've said before, we've taken a very high level look at the EV parity. And as Commissioner said, that when we came up with the number, it was generally about $300. We actually engaged with the University of Tennessee to have them do their analysis, and they dug into all the FHWA, USDOT statistics and came back to 275. But roughly today, we have 16 million purely electric vehicles. That impact to the
16,000. What did I say? Million.
oh no
16,000.
Sorry. It's that time of year.
We're in
Millions, billions, I
trouble.
don't know.
16 million.
16,000 electric vehicles. The impact to the state is somewhere around, if they had been gas-powered vehicles, been about $3 million. The concern we have is, to your point, as electric vehicles are coming, we're not insane. We know they're coming. Drive Electric Tennessee thinks we'll have 200,000 by year 2028, and that's going to be close to a $40 billion drop. So yes, without some actions, we are going to see some issues. And like I said, I'm very concerned with the gas and diesel and the special petroleum being behind budget and just not actually delivering what we did last year.
Yeah.
So
Okay, thank you. Going to our list, Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Good evening, gentlemen, or good morning, not evening. It seems like I hadn't been to bed yet. I want to focus on the smart lanes, express lanes, and how, because I'm very familiar with them in other cities I've been to, and as I said, I told the commissioner yesterday, my brother lives in Dallas, so I've been witnessing them for over 20 years. But I think where you're conceptualizing them is a little different than the way they're doing them, and I wanted to have a few questions. Is there any way possible that I'm focusing on I-24 right now since that's what I travel, the SOV lanes, and I am saying V with a Victor, not anything else. But I wanted to see, right now we use those in each direction 2 hours a day. Would there be anything that would prohibit us converting those 2 lanes to express lanes rather than building additional lanes to the side? Because some of the area, unless we build new bridges, we can't add lanes. They're already maximized out to where the exit ramps are and the inside pillars. So is there any way we could convert those? Would the federal government let us convert those without hurting us, to have those 2 lanes be express lanes so they could open up both directions,
Yes,
one
sir.
in the morning, one in the evening, and
Yeah.
then still pay to use them?
Yeah, good question, Chairman. So one thing that I appreciate you bringing out is kind of the Texas experience and how what they have done there. And I think it's important for the people of our state to understand that these are not what we think of as traditional toll roads, to where you have to pay a fee to get into the toll road and a fee to get out on the other side, and it's a toll from point A to point B that everybody on that road has to pay. These are, as I said earlier, a choice that people have to be able, on an existing roadway like I-24 that you point out, to be able to get into one of these choice lanes, express lanes, to be able to get to where they're going in a guaranteed time period. The other lanes are maintained, so this is additional capacity. Now, some states have the lanes that you're talking about, some states don't. and different states are doing it different ways. And what we're asking this body for, in the legislature for in this session is the authority to be able to do these managed lanes. Once we get that authority, we know from the congestion studies that we've already conducted that there are needs, pressure points in each of our 4 major urban areas that potentially could warrant being able to have these lanes. But we need to do the additional study that you're talking about to be able to delve in to say, some states, some of you have been to Georgia, they have a reversible lane. It goes in the morning and out in the afternoon, and they do it that way in the center. Some states have utilized the HOV or lane to be able, the high occupancy lane to be able to utilize these. And then what we will do is not take away from anything that we have. If we utilize that, then the HOV people could utilize that lane and be able to continue to take advantage of that lane as well. But what we're looking to do is provide additional options for our people to have a choice to be able to do this and get to where they're going faster. And so that's how that would work, sir.
You have a follow-up?
Commissioner, can I?
Yes,
Yeah.
regardless of whether we were to convert the HOV lanes or build additional lanes on your private-public partnership, how you're envisioning it, would the actual building or conversion of lanes be a joint, or would we convert it and then lease it back to them? And so how would that be handled?
Yeah, the benefit of this process that other states have enjoyed is that the private partnership will finance the building and the operations of these facilities. And so they would design it, they would build it, they finance it, and they would operate and maintain it over time. And so what that allows us to do is to take whatever amount that contributes to our new project, our new construction. It allows us to take that similar amount of dollars and reallocate those and put them into other projects that we wouldn't otherwise be able to fund in Tennessee. And our plan, the governor's plan, is to prioritize the dollars that we benefit from that and put those into expanding our rural interstates so that we can get some of those projects going that we hadn't otherwise been able to do.
All right, the list is growing, so we'll try to
Mr.
move
Chairman.
through these as quick as possible. Was it, you have
Did you-
another
Just
follow-up?
one last question
Okay.
to follow up. I'm trying to verify everything I can to get it confirmed to what I understand of
Yes.
none and other. If once these lanes are built, it's my understanding, at least it's how it's done in like Texas, that a person who wants to use these I call them express lanes, that they would buy like a sticker on their car, and cameras would capture the sticker to allow them to be in the lane. And if you're not in the lane, you get billed, basically ticketed home for using it. That's what it is. And my brother in Texas, is that how it would be,
Yes,
or
sir.
how?
Most of them operate with a transponder. It's actually an electronic reader that shows that it sends a signal that lets you know that you were in that lane. And the way it typically works is you would sign up. It's kind of like a debit card. You could choose to put $100 or some amount onto an account to where every time you went through it, then it would just click that it picks up that you went through the lane, and it would debit your account. So that's typically the way it works. Will, did
Let
you
me,
have
let me just inject here. If you have questions that we're not able to get to here, the commissioner and his team are very amenable to coming by and talking to you one-on-one, and all you have to do is reach out to them. They'll be glad to come to your office
Absolutely.
one-on-one and answer your question. Was there a follow-up from
I
the
think
desk?
Will had a
Will?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to add on to one part of your question there, Chairman, with regard to the actual physical construction. As is with the scenario of how these choice lanes will actually be constructed and operated, there are a myriad of options out there. But as far as adding additional capacity, when I think about 24, one of the things that has to be looked at and thought about is the fact that while building on the inside and putting new structure seems like, well, that's a tremendous amount of expense. You have to balance that with the right of way that would be required should you do a traditional type widening project. So not only is there cost associated with that, but the development potential of that corridor and the impact to residents and businesses that are along that corridor. So one of the things you see fairly frequently throughout the country is it's actually less expensive to build structure within the center of an existing corridor and go up or even under in some cases with these choice lanes. So that's one of the factors that you look at is what is the right-of-way impact depending on the scenario that you choose to use.
Moving on, Speaker Marsh, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was fortunate to go to Dallas with a commissioner and look at what Texas has done. And what Will just said is we were looking at these roads and I thought about I-24 and I'm like, there is no way to do this. So I asked their engineer, I said, how did you do this? He said, that's why we're engineers. We figure it out. And I was amazed how in the middle that there's no room, but it went up on one stand and it was over the top and it was down below. And it just made perfect sense that you didn't have to spend money buying the land, getting the EPA work done on it and buying all those people out and losing the property tax that the people were already collecting. So it's a win-win. The question I wanted to ask was about the $300 electric vehicle charge. Is that what you're saying, $300, is that the state's portion of the fuel tax or is that the state and federal portion?
That's the total. So what we were looking to do is to say, what's the average Tennessean that goes to the gas pump? What's the cost to that person to be able to fill up their gas tank, and what do they contribute on an annual basis through both the state and the federal to our being able to build roads and maintain roads in Tennessee? So that's where we came up with that number. As Joe said, I mean, we've continued to zero in and try to get better data. And we asked UT to help us.
Right, and UT came up again with $274, $110 of that is federal. The other 164 is the state side.
Would you give the 100 to a federal, or we would just say that's the federal part that they would send back to us and we would keep it all up front?
But the reason we're including federal is because every gas power, we look at a cash basis. So if you're an electric vehicle today, you pay $100 in state, nothing in federal. If you're a gas powered car in the state, you send 164 to the state and 110 to federal. We actually, because of, and you've heard me before ad nauseum, the Highway Trust Fund's insolvent. So with all these general fund infusions, we actually get back more than we take in, than we send them. So that's why we have to include the federal, Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Ely, for being here. I was very excited in your presentation talking about transit buses being able to take these choice lanes and also possibly where we use up the HOV lanes, letting the high occupancy vehicles use the choice lanes also. But my question to you on these choice, two questions real quick. Number one is, who will control the price of the choice lanes? I understand in Virginia, the price has gotten out of hand up to $20 a trip and has become not economical for the working man. So who would control the price of our choice lanes?
That's a great question, Representative Beck. The state always is in control of the pricing of these lanes. So that's a great point, and to ensure that the state always has that authority, there would be a board that would be that would be in effect upon passage of this legislation. And so that is the governing board, if you will, to ensure, and they would develop a pricing formula structure to where when we started moving toward doing an RFP, all this would be done, by the way, on a competitive basis to where anybody who is a legitimate proposer could be able to propose on this, and they would understand the rules of the pricing formula, and that would be considered in their overall proposal as to what they would offer to be able to do this for. And so we the state would always have that ultimate control over what that pricing is.
You have a follow-up? You're
Ye-
recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, 7 years ago, Senator Ketron and I passed a bill
Mhm.
for buses on shoulders to, as we all know, is with mass transit, you've got to, pass the traffic congestion in order for people to say, I should be on the mass transit. And that's been a very successful program in Minnesota and other states. I don't think we've ever utilized it. Do you have any knowledge of us moving forward on that?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, this will be one of the largest contributors to public transit that we could ever offer. In that we've been talking about bus rapid transit in Tennessee for years, and this is rapid transit to be able to allow the local transit buses to be able to get in these lanes. And not only that, we would be able to dictate the terms of the contract or the proposal to ask for carpooling or park and ride, those kind of assets that would be part of these corridors as we built them. So every place that these have come into being has experienced more reliability for public transit because they know they can get to where they're going on a reliable time frame. They've increased ridership, and they've reduced the overall travel time, just like they would anybody that is in them. But it's been a boon in every other state. That's the numbers I was showing here. Ridership in Florida is up 4 times. I mean, Georgia, 10% increase. I mean, it's a great asset for public transit and gets all people where they're going faster.
You're recognized.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. One last question. How much did the infrastructure bill bring to Tennessee from the feds? Number one. And number two is, I'm very concerned about maintenance. It's great to get our grass cut every now and then. So we would really appreciate some attention
Yeah.
to that.
Well,
Thank you.
couple of things, and then I'm gonna let Joe answer that. But the governor and I both have been in businesses where maintaining what we have is paramount, because we all know that deferring our maintenance and not taking care of what we have is not saving us money. It's costing us money. We're going to have to pay for it sooner or later. And so he's a big believer, and I'm a big believer in maintaining what we have. That's part of what we're dealing with here as we move forward, because we only have a certain amount that we can spend through our current resources with the gas tax. We're spending a bigger percentage each year just maintaining what we have. So all these projects that we all know need to happen in order to continue getting our people where they need to be, and jobs and so forth, are going to continue to lessen over time if we don't take some action. And so you want to?
Yeah, I'll add to that. If we talked about earlier, the slide where we had the pie that showed the 500 million, yeah, right here. If that 1.2 does not increase and our maintenance costs increase, which they are right now, we are going through our planning process now. We're putting more dollars into mowing, litter, as well as paving. And I think everyone would agree after last winter, that's something that we need to pay attention to. As those dollars grow, the red circle decreases because the pie is finite. So we're seeing that continue year in and year out. And one of the other reasons that's very important is most of our maintenance activities are not eligible for federal aid. We are about 50-50 in terms of how we spend our dollars in our program, state versus federal. The majority of our federal dollars go to our what we call our heavy construction program, which is a lot of what's in the red there. So as maintenance costs increase for our state dollars, we get dangerously close to the ability to match the federal dollars that we want to draw down from the federal government for our heavy construction program. So that balancing act becomes more difficult as more money has to be spent on state of good repair. And that's a core issue for us. We're going to do that. Just understand that as that pie shrinks, that puts us in a more difficult position to be able to match those federal dollars.
And you asked about the budget. So the IIJA, the initial thrust from 21 to 22 was about $280 million over what we had before. If you wanted a breakout, so on that side, the FHWA, as I said before, is about 1.2 billion. The FAA is about 13 million. It's really just for the general aviation airports. And the FAA is up a little over 100 million. So I hope that answers your question.
If I could just tag, go
It
ahead.
does, thank you.
Go ahead. If I could just tag on to that, as I understand it, before we move on to Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're next. As I understand it, if this bill passes and the P3 funds are indeed approved to bring those resources in, it would free up TDOT's budget to then spend potentially money on public transportation. So I think that's a good thing, especially for the large metro areas. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Commissioner.
No, it would free up dollars for us to spend on the projects, if transit, aviation, if we needed it for our general
Whatever the need
aviation
is.
airports,
Yeah.
whatever the needs would be. Yes,
Chair
sir.
Lady Hazelwood, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Commissioner and team, or Deputy Governor. I never know which one of your titles I should use. A couple of questions in different areas. First of all, I understand now that by statute, we can only have 5 design build projects in Tennessee. And so part of this legislation would remove that level, that number. But in other conversations with you, I've heard you say that a large majority of the projects in Tennessee would still be done, in our traditional process. Can you help us understand which ones would be where and kind of how that mix would be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about the history of the building process, the traditional method of building transportation projects was what we call design, bid, build. And I'm gonna let Will add to this because his engineering acumen is obviously better than mine. But what we have seen is that as time has gone on, the complexity of these projects has certainly changed because the urban nature that we're having to build in many cases, like originally when we were building a lot of our assets, they were in corn pastures. I mean, and so it was a fairly easy engineering process. And so now it's gotten much more complicated, and therefore our method of being able to deliver that project is more complicated. Other states have had much more success with design build, where all of that's being done at the same time. It speeds up the process. And so, Will, why don't you address that? And
I think the critical thing is it's about having the right tool for the right job. Not every project is conducive to a design build model, just like not every project is conducive to the traditional design bid build model. It's really about us having the ability to, when we go to solve a problem, if we need a Phillips head screwdriver, we don't have nothing but flatheads in the toolbox. That's really what it's about. And we have problems of all types across the state that we need to be able to solve. And the reality is the design bid build model has been very successful for this state. It has, we're very proud of the condition that our infrastructure is in. We appreciate y'all's huge contribution to that. We didn't get here by accident. The design bid build process is a very good one. It's a low cost process, but when you look at projects that are of significant risk, that's what this is about, is being able to deal with risk. Take 440, for instance. Delivering that project in 703 days would not have been possible in the design bid build environment. A project like that would take up to 4 years. It's just the difference in the type of tool. It's an assembly line type of mentality versus a NASCAR pit stop, which is, I think, one of the graphics that we show. And again, I just want to make the point that it's very important that we have the flexibility to choose the right tool for the job at hand.
So would I be correct in assuming that for more complicated projects, urban projects specifically, you would be looking at design build, whereas maybe in other areas where it was a less complex project, we would stick with the design bid build? Would that be kind of how it would
I
fall
think
out?
that would in general, that would probably be the case. But I would say it really depends on the risks associated with the project. For instance, if you have a tremendous amount of utility impact on a project, to us, that equates to risk. If you have a lot of structures on a project, that is risk for us. If you have you could have a stretch of urban interstate that has neither of those, it may not be conducive to the design bid build model, or design build model rather. Again, it has to be looked at on a project basis. And as far as the limits are concerned, one of the things that we're looking at is that decision needs to be made early on in the scoping phase of the project. By only having 5 opportunities in the design build, the way the legislation is now, we are very limited in making that decision early on in the process, because there are literally thousands of needs out there that we have to sift through all the time to make a decision. So it's really important that we have the flexibility to make that decision early.
You recognize.
And one final question on a different subject, follow up to other questions here earlier about the EV fees. I live in a corner of the state, and so I have, as lots of Tennesseans do, we have border states very close by. And when I look at the rates in some of those states versus what they're already charging versus what we're proposing, the 300, I think Georgia's maybe 100, and I've forgotten the numbers, but are we looking at, I think there are 2 issues: that's being competitive, if you will, with our surrounding states, and also the fact that Tennessee is, we've sort of made ourselves the home for EV vehicles. A lot of them are being produced in my county. A lot of them will be produced in West Tennessee. So I just want us to make sure that we've taken that into account, and that we're not damaging an industry that we're attempting to grow here.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with you totally in that we cherish the EV industry, the manufacturing industry in this state. We've been blessed and fortunate to be able to have some of the best manufacturers in the world to be able to come here to Tennessee to produce their product. And so we in no way want to negatively impact what they're doing. And I think most people recognize that that people who are buying electric vehicles are doing so in many cases to avoid the gas purchases and those kind of things. But we recognize that we don't like to be the highest in anything, and so we're continuing to work, as Joe said, on the actual number to make sure we get it right. But again, what we're seeking is simply parity between the person in our state who's putting money into their gas car and what the same amount of expense that we're putting out from the state of Tennessee into our road system and the amount of damage that all vehicles do to our roadways, and making sure that that's fair and equitable between everybody that drives a car, no matter what that might be. And so, but we certainly, we've invested together as a state of, as you know, hundreds of millions of dollars with these companies to incentivize them to come to Tennessee. And so that certainly demonstrates our support of that industry, I think.
Committee, we have 1 minute left, and we've got a long list. So I'm going to go to Chairman Russell and then ask the commissioner and his team. In the interest of making it a priority that everyone's questions get answered, would you be agreeable to coming back at a later time and finishing this conversation?
Absolutely.
We
Yes,
might,
sir.
if your schedule allows,
Yeah.
well, I think we could do it
My schedule will allow.
Okay, next Tuesday morning. So that's on the record. We'll try to do that because I think it's important that everybody's questions get answered on this issue. And there may be some questions on other issues involving TDOT. So we'll
Sure.
have an hour to do that next time. But we'll finish with Chairman Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say thank you to all the TDOT employees that may be watching. They do an outstanding job. My question's in reference to the funding of the Improve Act, since we went from 2017, which it was going to solve all of our problems to fix these 962 roads and bridges, to 2019, we don't have enough money to fund it. I think that's pretty important to look at. So what guarantee can TDOT make that these remaining projects will be completed and not kicked down the road like State Route 322 in Monroe County was for 30 years? That was supposed to have been done under the McWhorter gas tax.
Well, you've hit on what I think is the reason we're sitting here. Frankly, we have projects in the Improve Act. And there's a lot of reasons, from inflation and how these projects have expanded, the length of time these projects are taking. All of that time is money, right? And so, so I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for that. What I'm trying to do is to offer some solutions. But I can tell you that we have a finite amount of revenue coming into this state that we can invest in roads. And we have 1,000 projects thereabouts in the Improve Act, some of which have already been delivered, but a great many of them still have not. And in addition to that, we have a number of new projects that have evolved since then. Transportation is changing every day. Development in your districts is changing every day, and the needs are changing every day. And so we've got a number of other projects that have been added actually since the Improve Act, some of which probably have prioritization over some of those that were in the Improve Act. And so that is the major challenge that we have before us. And what we're trying to accomplish by this is to be able to create a mechanism where we can get additional financing and revenue stream to be able to partner with the private sector to do that, and yet then be able to use our dollars to do additional projects that we would not otherwise be able to do. And so your question is exactly the basis for the solution that we're trying to accomplish with this program.
Chairman Russell, if you don't mind, we're 5 minutes past our time. The chairman for the next committee is in the room, so that's our signal to quit. So I will say that you will be the first one on the list next time, followed by Chairman Whitson, and we'll take this conversation up next Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, if that's convenient for you, Commissioner, and your staff. Thank you all for coming. A good conversation,
Thank
good
you all.
answers, and
Thank you.
we are adjourned.